I'd like you all to stand and look at the back side of your sheet. We're going to read our text from the Gospel of Matthew, and you can relax. I have a short sermon today. It's not long, but I want us to read this together. This is Matthew 5, verses 13 to 16, aloud together. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Thank you. You may be seated. May God add his blessing to the reading of his word. What we just read is an excerpt from Jesus' most famous sermon. We call it the Sermon on the Mount. And in this little section we just read, Jesus uses two very familiar metaphors to describe his people. He's salt and light. Now, salt and light are both good, but both can also be used in bad ways. Gather enough light together in one spot and you have a laser beam that is capable of destroying many things. Too much salt causes health problems for some people. I don't really like salt that much. I don't really like salty foods, so potato chips, pizza, take it or leave it. But I'm wondering, without looking at your phone, hopefully all your phones are off anyway, without looking at your phone, how much salt do you think the average American consumes in one day?
1.5 teaspoons.
How much?
1.5 teaspoons.
1.5 teaspoons. That kid is smart, or else he looked at my notes beforehand. I'm kind of guessing the latter. 1.5 teaspoons of salt. Wow. Salt is almost a magical kind of substance when you think about it. You know, it reduces bitterness from some foods. It enhances sweetness. It boosts flavor. It uses a preservative to keep foods from perishing. What else can do that? It's in almost everything. It's in soft drinks. Did you know that? That kind of pop that you're drinking, you know how much salt is in there? There's like 50 to 70 milligrams of salt in a 12-ounce can. That's about the same amount as in one slice of a dill pickle. Quite a bit of salt in that. A deli tuna sandwich. How much salt how many milligrams do you think is in a deli tuna sandwich? This is going to shock you. 1,300 milligrams. That's more than a large slice of pepperoni pizza. About 1,200. Bagels with cream cheese. One bagel with cream cheese. That's kind of a healthy food, huh? Not really. 634 milligrams of salt. How about a sausage egg McMuffin? Not as bad as I thought it would be. 830 milligrams, less than a deli tuna sandwich. How about a Joe's Donut Maple Bar? I don't know. That's health food, isn't it? I think that is health food. Okay, one more. A large tub of theater popcorn. Yeah, that's right. 1,500 milligrams, and that's without the buttery stuff. So you add the buttery stuff, it's a killer. 1,500 milligrams, by the way, is the maximum salt per day of what they say we're supposed to be eating. So if you have a tub of popcorn, you're done with salt for the day. But did you know you have to have salt to live? Your body requires salt. Your nerves, your muscles cannot work without salt. And what's fascinating is we can't manufacture it. We have to take it in from the outside. And so salt is important, and it's been important throughout human history. There have been many, many international disputes over salt, and lots of trade. In fact, during the Middle Ages, there were caravans of thousands of camels that went from Europe across the Sahara Desert down into Africa, and they were all carrying salt. Timbuktu we know it had a robust slave trade, but Timbuktu also had a huge salt market. Salt became very scarce in the U.S. Civil War in the South. Before the war, all the southern states got their salt from northern mines, and then so the Southern Army really started to struggle because they did not have enough salt for the soldiers, until they discovered that Avery Island, Louisiana, which is the home of, anybody know what that's the home of? Tabasco sauce, yes. Avery Island, Louisiana was not just the home of Tabasco sauce. That was actually invented after the Civil War. But that town, the island, is really a salt dome. It's all salt underneath. And so the Southern Army got their salt from there. When I was growing up, we had no refrigerator or freezer. And so when the salmon were running, my folks used to brine salmon. They would soak the salmon in a brine. And I remember Dad telling someone else, somebody asked him, how much salt do you put in the brine? And I always remember him saying, enough to float a potato. That's how much salt you put in there. When the potato floats, you got enough. And then I remember Mom also would take the salmon bellies and layer them with rock salt and put them in a wooden stave barrel. And so we could eat salted salmon bellies in the wintertime. I remember being at my grandmother's, my dad's mom's house when I think I was in 5th grade. And my grandmother served us a lunch of salt pork and dandelion greens. Have you ever tasted salt pork? How many of you have had salt pork? Nobody?
Esther.
Esther, yes, salt pork. Did you like it, Esther?
I did.
You did?
I was
Okay,
young, but I did like it.
the salt pork that you ate, was it actually some meat or was it just fat?
Well, it seemed like it was fat.
That's what I thought too, just fat, yeah. My grandmother puts on the plate these dandelion greens that she had cooked, of all things, and these clumps of fat from a pig. And I hated it. It took a couple I tried, but couldn't eat it. And of course my grandmother, you have to know my grandmother Arnold, and she says, well, what's the matter? Are you not hungry? And I kind of said, yeah, I'm not hungry. So she grabs my plate and she says, okay then, I'll put it in the icebox and you can have it for dinner. Thankfully my dad knew the truth and he was there and he said, oh, Mom, I don't think Barry cares for this, so I didn't have to eat it after all. So what did Jesus have in mind when he said his followers were salt? Notice that in the text we just read, if you look at that, it doesn't say his followers should be salt. It says his followers are salt. You are the salt of the earth. I think a couple things. First of all, as Christ followers, we should flavor wherever we are. We should be free to flavor. Christ's followers affect every situation they're in. They change the flavor of every group they're in. Jesus said that this little handful of men and women who followed him would affect the whole world. That's amazing when you consider that none of them were highly educated, none of them were celebrities. There was no Kanye's there to say, hey, follow this guy. None of them were well known. There was no television, there was no social media. Jesus didn't wine and dine the Jewish elites. He just said, you guys, this little handful of apostles and women who are following him, you guys be salt. You just go be salt. And he left before they even started one church because he knew the salt would work. All he had was this group of salty followers. And anyone who contacted them came away going, whoa, that was salty. Now, remember what they got accused of in Acts 17? They were in Asia Minor, a place called Thessaloniki, and there they got arrested and hauled in front of the authorities. And the accusation was these apostles had turned the world upside down. They had changed everywhere they went. They had changed the community because they were so salty. Now, it's not coincidental that Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." He said that right after he talked about persecution. He said, because when you're salt, you're not always welcome. Not every group that you're in appreciates what you're bringing to that group. Jesus had just said, "Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven." So you can expect some opposition when you are salty. We've seen just a hint of that persecution in some of the ways churches have been treated in the last several months in the political realm. I mean, think about it. Liquor stores are essential. Churches are not. I don't know if you saw the letter that Dr. John MacArthur, he's a pastor of Grace Community Church in Sun Valley, California. I don't know if you saw the letter that he and his elders wrote last week. Very, very good, very thoughtful letter, very calmly and resolutely. MacArthur just wrote basically to the governor of California, who had wanted to shut down all churches and said nobody could sing. He basically said, just so you know, we don't look to you for guidance on how to do our faith. There is a place for civil government, but he says, we don't get our orders on how to do church from the governor. It was really well done. And he said, we're gonna have church. We're gonna be careful, but we're gonna have church. And he even said in the letter, we don't get it from the U.S. Constitution either, that we have freedom of religion. It's not up to Caesar whether we have church. So we get it from the Bible. The Bible and Christ is above the Constitution. The Christ in the Bible is above any governor or any official. Really, really appreciated that. And Franklin Graham has been kind of promoting John MacArthur in the last few days. And yesterday he was saying on social media, he said, go fill that church, fill their parking lot. I guess they set up a bunch of tents outside, which was wonderful. Now there's a way that Christians can avoid opposition. The middle of verse 13 says, if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. So salt is such a stable substance that it's not easy. In fact, it's practically impossible to change salt into some other substance. But it can be contaminated. It can be diluted. It can be diluted to the point where it's actually useless, practically useless. And when Christians are no longer salty, they become useless to the Lord. Jesus expected his followers to press forward in sharing the gospel. And he also expected them to improve and to enhance whatever setting they were in. And I think sometimes Christians lose sight of that. They start thinking that what we're really about is being against stuff. Standing up against stuff. We have to, for instance, stand up. We feel strongly about standing up for defending the lives of unborn babies. We feel very strongly about that. It's a noble cause. Andrew Dietrich and I were talking about this a few days ago. And I liked what Andrew added to our conversation. He said, I think the church needs to be in the community and loving those who are thinking of an abortion before they walk up the steps to the clinic. That's what it's like to be salt. The gospel is a very positive, it's a life-giving message, and a little salt applied in the right places can have great effects. So don't be discouraged when you feel like you're in the minority or you feel like you're not making a huge difference. In Colossians 4, the Apostle Paul said that our speech, our words, should be seasoned with salt. And David and Yvonne, I hope you're careful when you pull out of your driveway. Just, wow, some of those people are going really fast. A guy named Sinclair Ferguson wrote this: too little salt and we do not taste the flavor of the food. Too much and we are left with the unpleasant taste of salt. Like salt, our lives and our speech are to bring out the flavor of Jesus Christ. So we're to be salt. The second metaphor that Jesus used, a very familiar one, he said we're to be light. He says, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Light is powerful. Light is very powerful. Christians cannot be light if they isolate, if they pull back, if they hide. You can't just retreat into seclusion and be light. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was one of the very few religious leaders to stand up against Hitler and the Nazi regime, from prison right before his execution, he wrote, a community of Jesus which seeks to hide itself has ceased to follow him. And over and over in the Gospels, we see Jesus going into the community, spending time with sinners and people that were not yet followers, and shining light on those things. Light and darkness. Light and darkness. Now, we don't have any real darkness. Actually, Knowles have darkness here, much more than at my house. I remember one time, years ago, coming out and laying somewhere out here and watching the Perseid meteor showers from this property. You could see just these shooting stars all over the place. We can't do that at my house. When I sit in the hot tub, I can pick out the North Star and a few other stars, but it's pretty light. Jesus' listeners knew about darkness. They didn't have street lights. They didn't have city lights. In fact, we often misunderstand this metaphor. Jesus says a city on a hill cannot be hid. And so if you paint a picture of it, you show all this city with this glow around it at night. That's not what he's talking about. Jerusalem didn't glow. They had little clay lamps and some tiki torches, but that's not going to make the city glow. He's talking about daytime, when you're a long distance off and you're looking up at this city and you have those limestone walls that the sun is shining bright off of. That's what people see, and that's what Jesus had in mind. And if there's ever been a time in our culture when we need to be that city on a hill, it's now. It's now. Peter echoes Jesus' metaphor when he writes, be careful to live properly among your unbelieving neighbors. Then even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior and they will give God the glory when he judges the world. So Jesus does not call us to be fireflies for him, all right? Not fireflies. We've got to be light enough so we're illuminating things, so we're making a difference. He says, you will be my witnesses. Shine the light. And I think, in the last several months with COVID, we have all done plenty of grumbling, and I have done my share as well. We've all mourned our losses of what we don't have. But if what Jesus said is true, COVID-19 cannot change who you are. You are salt. You are light. And I really believe, and I have seen many instances where this time of the pandemic has provided opportunities for us to be salt and light that we never would have had before. And I will say this just as an aside. I think this is going to be good for us as a church. I think it's going to be really good for the church in general, the Church of Christ. It will purify the church. Persecution, difficult times always do that. And we're going to come out of this better. So think about this as I finish up here. Here's a question you take with you. How can you be salt and light in the opportunities that you have this week? How can you, despite all of the frustration of not knowing what's happening with school and not having essential sports? I mean, sports are more essential than liquor stores. Come on. How can we put God's kingdom first? How can we fulfill his purposes for us, being salt and light? Eric, come on up, lead us in a Seek Ye First the Kingdom of God. Is that the next song?
Last one.
Or that's the last song. Good song anyway.